The alarm bells rang through the Zephyrian monitoring station Delta 7 with a sound that made Lieutenant Commander Vextal's forearms twitch in annoyance. He had been enjoying his morning meal of crystallized nutrients when the sensors picked up something unusual in the Outer Rim territories. For 40 years he had worked at this remote outpost, and nothing interesting ever happened here. Space debris, wandering asteroids, and the occasional merchant vessel were all they ever saw in this forgotten corner of the galaxy. Vextal moved his tall blue form across the control room to check the readings himself. His large black eyes studied the displays with practiced ease. The object was moving through space at a steady pace, but its energy signature was unlike anything in their databases. It was not an asteroid because asteroids did not generate power readings like this one. It was not space debris because debris did not move in such straight lines. The object seemed to be under intelligent control, but its design was completely unknown to the Empire's vast records. The Zephyrian Empire had ruled the galaxy for over 3,000 years. They had met and catalogued thousands of different species across millions of star systems. Their technology was the most advanced in known space, and their military had never faced a real challenge. Every species they encountered either joined the Empire willingly or was easily conquered. The idea that something unknown could exist in their territory was almost impossible to believe. Vextal called his senior technician over to double-check the sensor readings. The technician was a young Zephyrian female named Kelra, who had joined the station only 2 years ago. She was still excited by the possibility of discovering something new, while Vextal had long ago accepted that nothing new ever happened anymore. Kelra studied the displays with wide eyes, and her skin changed to a pale yellow color that indicated confusion and concern. The energy readings were indeed strange. The object seemed to be powered by something the Empire had never encountered before. Their sensors could detect massive amounts of energy being generated, but could not identify the source. The power output was enormous, far beyond what any known species could produce. Even more puzzling was that the energy seemed to be contained perfectly with no waste or leakage that usually marked primitive technology. Far away in the depths of space, Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UHS Defiant and watched the stars through the main viewing screen. He was a tall man with brown hair and calm blue eyes who had spent 15 years in Earth's Space Navy before being chosen for humanity's first deep space exploration mission. The Defiant was humanity's most advanced starship, built with the best technology Earth could produce and powered by a fusion reactor that had taken 20 years to perfect. Jake had grown up dreaming of exploring the galaxy and meeting alien civilizations. As a child, he had read countless books about space exploration and had always wondered if humans were alone in the universe. Now at age 42, he was finally living that dream as the captain of humanity's first vessel to travel beyond the Sol system. The mission was supposed to last 5 years and would take them to dozens of star systems that showed signs of intelligent life. Chief Engineer Lisa Carter approached Jake with a concerned expression on her face. She was a short woman with red hair who had designed many of the Defiant's key systems herself. Lisa had been working with the ship's sensors and had detected some unusual gravitational readings ahead of their current position. The readings suggested the presence of massive artificial structures that could only have been built by an advanced civilization. Lisa explained that the gravitational signatures were unlike anything in Earth's databases. The structures appeared to be enormous, possibly larger than anything humans had ever built. They were definitely artificial because natural objects did not create such organized gravitational patterns. The structures were still several light hours away, but their size meant they could be detected. Even at this great distance, communications. Officer Ryan Brooks was a young man with black hair who had joined the mission because of his talent with alien languages and first contact protocols. He had spent years studying theoretical xenolinguistics and was excited about the possibility of making first contact with an alien species. Ryan had been monitoring all communication frequencies since they entered this region of space, but had detected only faint background signals that seemed to originate from the massive structures Lisa had found. Ryan reported that the signals appeared to be some form of organized communication network. The signals were too complex to be natural phenomena, but were using transmission methods that Earth science had never encountered. The mathematics underlying the signals suggested a level of technological advancement that was impressive even by human standards. Ryan was eager to attempt communication, but knew they needed to be careful about revealing too much about human capabilities. Back at monitoring station Delta 7, more alarm signals were sounding as additional sensors picked up the approaching human vessel. Vextal was now genuinely worried because the object was heading directly toward one of the Empire's most important border installations. If this was some kind of invasion force, they needed to alert the military immediately. The energy readings continued to climb as the object drew closer, and Vextal realized they might be dealing with technology that was more advanced than anything the Empire possessed. The Lieutenant Commander activated the emergency communication system and sent a priority alert to Admiral Kethron at the regional military headquarters. In his message, he reported that an unknown vessel with unprecedented energy signatures was approaching Imperial space and appeared to pose a potential threat to border security. He included all the sensor data they had gathered and recommended that military vessels be dispatched to investigate immediately. Admiral Kethran was a veteran military officer who had served the Empire for over 60 years. He had commanded fleets in dozens of campaigns and had never encountered an enemy that could challenge Imperial supremacy. When he received Vextal's report, he initially thought it must be some kind of sensor malfunction, or perhaps a new type of weapon being tested by the Empire's own scientists. However, when he reviewed the data himself, he realized that something truly unprecedented was approaching their territory. The energy readings were impossible according to current Imperial science. No known power source could generate such massive amounts of energy while maintaining perfect containment. The vessel's speed and trajectory suggested propulsion technology that was far beyond anything in the Empire's arsenal. Most troubling of all, the ship seemed to be completely unaware of Imperial presence and was approaching their most sensitive installations without any attempt at communication or identification. Admiral Kethran immediately ordered 3 of his fastest scout ships to intercept the unknown vessel and determine its intentions. He also placed the entire border fleet on high alert and requested additional reinforcements from the core worlds. Something was approaching that could change the balance of power in the galaxy, and he intended to be ready for whatever happened next. Dr. Elena Rodriguez moved quickly through the science laboratory, aboard the UHS Defiant as new data streamed in from their long-range sensors. She was a woman in her 30s with dark hair and intelligent brown eyes who had spent her entire career studying the possibility of alien life. Elena had dreamed of this moment since she was a child, but the reality was more overwhelming than she had ever imagined. The structures ahead of them were massive beyond comprehension and clearly built by a civilization that had mastered technology on a scale that dwarfed human achievements. The sensor readings showed construction patterns that defied human understanding of engineering. The alien structures appeared to be built from materials that should not have been able to support their own weight, yet somehow remained stable across vast distances. Elena estimated that some of the installations were larger than Earth's moon, and were connected by what appeared to be energy conduits that stretched across entire star systems. The mathematical precision required for such construction suggested a level of scientific knowledge that was centuries ahead of human capability. Navigation Officer Chris Taylor stood at his station reviewing multiple escape routes while trying to understand the massive installations surrounding them. He was a careful man who always planned for the worst-case scenario, and the current situation was definitely the worst case he had ever encountered. The alien structures formed a complex network that seemed to monitor and control traffic throughout this entire region of space. If these aliens decided that humans were a threat, the Defiant would need to escape quickly, and Chris wanted to be ready with several different options. Chris had noticed that the alien installations were positioned in ways that would make escape difficult for any vessel that entered their territory. Every major hyperspace route was monitored by at least 3 different stations, and the energy readings suggested that these stations possessed weapons that could destroy ships much larger than the Defiant. The aliens had clearly designed their border defenses to prevent any unwanted visitors from leaving once they arrived. This made Chris very nervous about their current situation. On the Zephyrian side of the encounter, Intelligence Director Quintar was mobilizing every available resource to gather information about the approaching vessel. She was one of the Empire's most experienced intelligence officers and had spent decades analyzing threats to Imperial security. Quintar had never encountered a situation where the Empire knew so little about a potential enemy. Their usual intelligence gathering Methods were completely ineffective against this unknown ship and its mysterious crew. Empire's most advanced probe ships had been dispatched to conduct close-range scans of the human vessel, but every attempt to gather detailed information had been detected and deflected by the ship's defensive systems. The probes were not destroyed, but were simply pushed away by some kind of energy field that the Empire's scientists could not identify. This defensive capability was far beyond anything the Empire had encountered in thousands of years of galactic exploration and conquest. Quintar studied the reports from her probe ships with growing concern. The unknown vessel seemed to detect Imperial scanning attempts almost instantly, and responded with countermeasures that were both sophisticated and gentle. Most species either failed to notice Imperial probes or responded with aggressive attacks that revealed their technological capabilities. This vessel's response suggested a level of technological sophistication that was matched by remarkable restraint and confidence. The Empire's greatest scientific minds were struggling to understand the basic principles behind the human ship's technology. Chief Science Advisor Mordan had assembled a team of the galaxy's leading experts in physics, engineering, and xenotechnology, but they could not explain what they were observing. The human vessel appeared to violate several fundamental laws of physics that the Empire had considered absolute truths for millennia. Morden was particularly puzzled by the ship's propulsion system. The vessel moved through space without creating the energy signatures that all known faster-than-light travel methods produced. There were no dimensional rifts, no exotic matter reactions, and no space-time distortions that typically marked advanced propulsion technology. The ship simply moved from one location to another as if the laws of physics did not apply to it in the same way they applied to Imperial vessels. Captain Jake Morrison remained unaware of the panic he was causing as he continued to follow standard human first contact protocols. He had ordered his crew to maintain defensive readiness while attempting to establish peaceful communication with whoever controlled the massive installations ahead of them. Jake had studied first contact procedures extensively during his military training, but had never expected to use them in a situation quite like this one. Security Chief Danny Walsh was a former Marine who had joined the Defiance crew specifically to handle any security issues that might arise during their exploration mission. He was a big man with a calm demeanor, who had seen combat in several conflicts on Earth and understood the importance of being prepared for any situation. Danny had placed his security teams on alert status and was monitoring all approaches to the ship, but he was not yet ready to consider the aliens as hostile forces. Danny's security preparations were being carefully observed by Zephyrian intelligence officers who interpreted every precaution as evidence of hostile intent. The systematic way the human security teams moved through the ship, and the professional manner in which they checked their weapons and equipment looked like preparations for an assault rather than defensive measures. The Empire's military analysts had never seen such methodical and confident preparations for combat among species they encountered. Medical Officer Amy Chen was preparing the ship's medical facilities for potential contact with alien biological systems. She was a skilled doctor who understood that first contact with alien species could result in biological contamination or medical emergencies that required careful preparation. Amy had studied theoretical xenobiology for years and was excited about the possibility of encountering alien life forms, but she also understood the potential dangers involved. Amy's medical preparations were also being monitored by Zephyrian observers who did not understand human medical protocols. Her careful sterilization procedures and biological containment systems looked like preparation for biological warfare rather than medical safety measures. The Empire's medical experts were horrified by what appeared to be systematic preparation for deploying biological weapons against alien populations. The Empire's ruling council convened an emergency session as reports continued to flood in about the approaching human vessel. Emperor Zelnoth himself was briefed on the situation and was deeply troubled by what he heard. In 3,000 years of Imperial expansion, no unknown species had appeared with technology that seemed to surpass their own. The very foundation of Imperial power was built on technological superiority, and the arrival of the human ship threatened to undermine everything. The Empire represented. The emergency council session lasted for hours as Imperial leaders debated how to respond to this unprecedented threat. Some council members argued for immediate military action, while others advocated for diplomatic contact. All agreed that the situation required the Empire's full attention and resources, because the arrival of this unknown vessel could change the balance of power in the galaxy forever. Tactical Officer Kevin Stone noticed the increasing number of alien vessels converging on their position and immediately reported the situation to Captain Morrison. Kevin was a young officer who had graduated at the top of his class from Earth's Naval Academy and had trained extensively in threat assessment and tactical analysis. He had been monitoring the alien fleet movements for several hours and was becoming increasingly concerned about the growing military presence surrounding the Defiant. The alien ships were approaching from multiple directions in what appeared to be a coordinated effort to surround the human vessel. Kevin counted at least 30 ships of various sizes, with more arriving every hour. The largest vessels appeared to be battleships that were 3 times the size of the Defiant, while the smaller ships looked like destroyers or cruisers designed for rapid attack missions. The formation pattern suggested a military force that was preparing for either capture or destruction of the human ship. Captain Morrison studied the tactical display and made the decision to implement standard military protocols for potential hostile contact. He ordered his crew to bring all defensive systems online and prepare for possible combat while maintaining their peaceful approach to the alien installations. Morrison had no desire to start a war with an unknown species, but he also had a responsibility to protect his crew and ensure their safe return to Earth. The sight of human weapon systems powering up sent shockwaves through the Zephyrian fleet commanders who were monitoring the situation. Admiral Kethron watched in horror as energy readings from the human ship climbed to levels that his instruments could barely measure. The weapon signatures were unlike anything in Imperial databases and appeared to be capable of destroying entire planets rather than just individual ships. The casual manner in which the humans activated such devastating firepower suggested they viewed it as routine defensive preparation. Emperor Zelnoth himself had taken personal command of the Imperial response after receiving reports that shook the very foundations of his understanding of galactic power. For 3 millennia, the Empire had been the supreme force in the galaxy, with technology that no other species could match. The appearance of a single ship that seemed to possess weapons more powerful than the Empire's entire battle fleet was a nightmare scenario that no Imperial leader had ever imagined possible. The Emperor ordered the deployment of the Empire's most advanced warships to contain what they now believed to be a scouting vessel for a massive invasion force. If this single ship possessed such incredible destructive power, then the civilization that built it must have fleets that could conquer the entire galaxy without difficulty. The Empire's survival might depend on their ability to negotiate terms of surrender. Before the full invasion began, Engineer Lisa Carter was working frantically with Communications Officer Ryan Brooks to boost their signal strength and establish meaningful contact with the aliens. They had been broadcasting standard first contact messages for hours, but had received no response that they could understand. Lisa was modifying the ship's communication array to try different frequencies and transmission methods while Ryan worked on mathematical sequences that might serve as a universal language. Their attempts to broadcast peaceful intentions were being interpreted by the Zephyrians as psychological warfare that demonstrated the humans' complete mastery of physics and mathematics. The transmission methods used principles that Imperial scientists did not understand, and the mathematical concepts being broadcast were so advanced that they made Imperial mathematics look primitive. The casual display of such superior knowledge convinced many Zephyrian leaders that resistance would be futile. General Torvik was the Empire's greatest military strategist and had commanded victorious campaigns against dozens of different species throughout his long career. He had never encountered an enemy that he could not defeat through superior tactics and overwhelming firepower, but the human ship presented challenges that seemed impossible to overcome. The vessel's casual movement through space showed complete disregard for Imperial territorial boundaries and suggested confidence that could only come from overwhelming military superiority. The human ship's behavior patterns were unlike anything Torvik had encountered in 50 years of military service. Most species either attacked immediately when confronted by Imperial forces or attempted to flee at maximum speed. The humans were doing neither. They continued to approach Imperial installations at a steady pace, while broadcasting strange signals and maintaining defensive systems that seemed capable of destroying anything the Empire could deploy against them. Dr. Elena Rodriguez finally achieved a breakthrough when she managed to establish basic communication with a Zephyrian science vessel that had approached to within scanning range. The alien scientists seemed eager to exchange information, and Elena was excited about the possibility of learning from a civilization that had clearly mastered technologies beyond human understanding. She began transmitting basic mathematical concepts and received responses that confirmed intelligence and scientific sophistication. However, the language barriers and fundamental differences in how the two species understood physics and mathematics led to catastrophic misunderstandings about human intentions and capabilities. When Elena transmitted information about human fusion technology, the Zephyrians interpreted it as casual discussion of planet-destroying weapons. When she described Earth's industrial capacity, they understood it as boasting about the ability to build invasion fleets on a galactic scale. The cultural differences between humans and Zephyrians made communication even more difficult than the language barriers. Humans tended to be direct and factual in their communications, while Zephyrians used complex social protocols and indirect references that carried important meaning. Elena's straightforward descriptions of human technology and society were interpreted as threats and intimidation tactics rather than friendly information sharing. Ryan Brooks detected what appeared to be panic in the alien communication networks as their messages became increasingly frantic and were being transmitted to locations throughout the galaxy. He could not understand the content of these messages, but the pattern suggested that news of human arrival was spreading rapidly through what must be a vast interstellar civilization. The sheer volume of communications traffic indicated that the aliens viewed human presence as an event of enormous importance. Captain Morrison was becoming increasingly concerned about the growing alien fleet and the apparent agitation in their communications. He had hoped that first contact would be a peaceful exchange of information between two spacefaring civilizations, but the situation seemed to be escalating toward a military confrontation that he desperately wanted to avoid. The Defiant was alone and far from home, while the aliens clearly had access to massive military resources. The misunderstandings were becoming more dangerous as both sides prepared for what they believed was inevitable conflict. The humans were following standard military protocols for a potentially hostile situation, while the Zephyrians were mobilizing their entire border defense network to contain what they saw as an existential threat to Imperial civilization. Neither side understood that their defensive preparations were being interpreted as aggressive actions by the other. Captain Morrison was growing frustrated with the failed attempts at peaceful communication and decided that a demonstration of their ship's capabilities might help show the aliens that humans had good intentions. He believed that if the aliens could see that the Defiant was capable of defending itself but chose not to attack, it would prove that humans were not interested in conquest or warfare. Morrison ordered his crew to perform a series of standard maneuvers and defensive system tests that he hoped would be interpreted as a peaceful gesture. The decision to demonstrate their capabilities was exactly the wrong choice Morrison could have made. The Zephyrian fleet commanders watching from a safe distance were already terrified by the energy readings coming from the human ship, and any display of its true power would only confirm their worst fears. Admiral Kethron had positioned his ships in what he believed was a safe observation distance, but he was not prepared for what he was about to witness. Weapons specialist Greg Murphy was a former artillery officer who had joined the Space Navy because he loved working with advanced weapon systems. He was excited about the chance to test their defensive systems in space and wanted to make sure everything was working perfectly in case they actually needed to defend themselves. Greg had been running diagnostic tests on their weapons for days, but had not yet fired them at full power because he had not wanted to waste ammunition on unnecessary tests. Greg conducted a routine calibration of their defensive particle beam systems by firing several test shots into empty space to ensure proper function and accuracy. The weapons were designed to destroy incoming missiles and small attack ships, but the energy discharge they created was far more spectacular than anyone aboard the Defiant had expected. The particle beams created brilliant flashes of light that could be seen across the entire star system and left temporary distortions in space that took several minutes to fade away. The Zephyrian observers watching from their command Ships were absolutely horrified by what they witnessed. The energy discharge from the human weapons created effects that their instruments had difficulty measuring and left distortions in space-time that resembled the aftermath of weapons capable of destroying entire planets. The casual manner in which the humans had fired such devastating weapons as mere test shots convinced the Zephyrians that they were dealing with a species that possessed military technology beyond their wildest nightmares. Emperor Zelnoth received reports of the weapons test within minutes and immediately convened an emergency war council to discuss their options. The weapons display had confirmed his worst fears about human capabilities, and he realized that the Empire was facing an enemy that could destroy their entire civilization without breaking a sweat. The Emperor had ruled the galaxy for over 2 centuries, but had never faced a threat that could end Imperial dominance so completely and so easily. The Empire's most advanced battleships attempted to match the human vessels' maneuvers in order to better understand their propulsion technology and defensive capabilities. Admiral Kethron ordered his ships to perform the same type of movements they had observed the human ship making, but the results were disastrous for the Imperial fleet. The Zephyrian ships were not designed to handle the gravitational forces that the human ship navigated effortlessly, and several vessels suffered structural damage while trying to keep up. The Imperial ship's inability to match human maneuvers convinced Admiral Kethron that their potential enemies possessed not just superior firepower but also propulsion and defensive technology that made them essentially untouchable in combat. The human ship moved through space as if it weighed nothing at all, while his own massive battleships struggled to change course or maintain formation. It was like watching a fighter pilot try to dogfight with a hummingbird. Navigation officer Chris Taylor had been monitoring the alien fleet's attempts to shadow their movements and was concerned about the increasing number of ships that seemed to be having mechanical problems. He suggested to Captain Morrison that they should demonstrate their ship's speed capabilities to show the aliens that they could leave the area quickly if necessary. Chris believed that proving they could escape at any time would reduce tensions and show that humans were not planning to invade or conquer alien territory. The resulting faster-than-light jump using the Defiance Alcubierre drive technology was performed flawlessly and moved the ship across several light-years in what appeared to be an instant. To the human crew, it was a routine faster-than-light jump that they had performed thousands of times during their journey from Earth. The drive created a bubble of compressed space-time around the ship that allowed it to travel faster than light without actually violating the speed limit of physics. To the Zephyrian observers, the human ship had simply vanished from one location and reappeared in another location several light-years away without any of the energy signatures or space-time distortions that marked faster-than-light travel in Imperial technology. Their sensors detected no dimensional rifts, no exotic matter reactions, and no gravitational waves that should have accompanied such movement. The ship had apparently teleported across vast distances using principles of physics that the Empire did not understand. The demonstration of human faster-than-light capabilities convinced the Zephyrian military leaders that their enemies could strike anywhere in the galaxy without warning and without using any technology that Imperial sensors could detect or track. General Torvik realized that his defensive strategies were completely useless against an enemy that could appear and disappear at will anywhere in Imperial territory. Traditional military tactics meant nothing against opponents who could ignore the basic limitations of physics. Medical Officer Amy Chen continued her preparations for potential alien contact by setting up quarantine protocols and biological containment systems throughout the medical bay. She had studied theoretical xenobiology for years and understood that first contact with alien species could result in biological contamination that might threaten both human and alien life. Amy was being very careful to ensure that any biological samples or contact with aliens would be handled safely and responsibly. The systematic and thorough nature of Amy's biological preparation was being observed by Zephyrian intelligence officers who interpreted her medical protocols as preparation for biological warfare on a massive scale. The Empire's medical experts were terrified by what appeared to be careful planning for the deployment of biological weapons that could wipe out entire planetary populations. The precision and professionalism with which the human medical officer worked suggested extensive experience with biological warfare techniques. The Empire's War Council spent hours debating whether they should attempt a preemptive strike against the human ship before it could summon reinforcements, or whether they should try to negotiate terms of surrender that might preserve some remnant of Imperial civilization. The discussion grew heated as military leaders argued for immediate action, while diplomatic advisors warned that attacking such a superior enemy might result in the complete destruction of the Empire rather than just its conquest. Science Officer Patricia Vale had been working around the clock for 3 days trying to decode the alien communication patterns, and finally achieved a major breakthrough when she managed to establish a crude but functional translation matrix with the Zephyrian scientists. Patricia was a brilliant linguist who had studied dozens of human languages and had developed theoretical frameworks for communicating with alien species that had never been tested until now. Her translation system was far from perfect, but it could handle basic concepts and simple ideas. The first clear message that Patricia managed to translate from the human ship was a simple greeting followed by an expression of peaceful intentions and a request for diplomatic contact. The message was transmitted in standard diplomatic language that any spacefaring civilization should be able to understand once the translation barriers were overcome. Captain Morrison had approved the message personally and had tried to make it as friendly and non-threatening as possible, while still maintaining the dignity appropriate for first contact between two civilizations. The message sent absolute shockwaves through the Empire's command structure because it completely contradicted everything they had observed about human behavior and capabilities. A species that possessed such overwhelming military superiority had no reason to request peaceful contact or express diplomatic intentions. In the Empire's experience, superior species either conquered inferior ones immediately or ignored them completely. The human request for peaceful dialogue suggested either incredible arrogance or a level of confidence that was even more terrifying than their demonstrated military power. Captain Morrison finally understood the true scope of the situation when Patricia Vale managed to establish direct, holographic communication with Emperor Zelnoth himself. The Emperor appeared as a tall blue humanoid with 4 arms and large black eyes, who wore elaborate robes that marked his position as the supreme ruler of a galactic empire. Morrison was surprised to learn that he had been dealing with such a vast civilization, and was even more surprised by the obvious fear and panic in the Emperor's manner. The human captain's straightforward manner and genuine confusion about the Empire's panic began to defuse some of the tension, but also raised new questions about human nature and capabilities. Morrison spoke directly and honestly about humanity's peaceful intentions and their desire to establish friendly relations with other spacefaring civilizations. His casual confidence and complete lack of fear or deference when speaking to the ruler of a galactic empire only reinforced Zephyrian beliefs about human superiority and power. Emperor Zelnoth had expected to be dealing with either conquest-minded warriors or cold, calculating strategists, but Morrison seemed to be neither. The human captain appeared to be genuinely confused by the Empire's fear and seemed to have no understanding of how threatening his ship and crew appeared to Imperial observers. This innocent confidence was perhaps even more frightening than open hostility, because it suggested that humans viewed their overwhelming technological superiority as completely normal and unremarkable. Dr. Elena Rodriguez took advantage of the improved communications to share human scientific data as a gesture of good faith and friendship between the two civilizations. She transmitted information about human mathematics, physics, and engineering in the hope that scientific collaboration might serve as a foundation for peaceful relations. Elena was excited about the possibility of learning from an alien civilization that had clearly mastered technologies beyond human understanding, and hoped that mutual scientific exchange would benefit both species. The casual mention of Earth's industrial capacity, interstellar colonies, and military fleets caused a fresh wave of panic among Zephyrian leaders who finally understood the true scale of human civilization. Elena's descriptions of Earth's shipbuilding facilities and space-based manufacturing centers suggested an industrial infrastructure that dwarfed anything the Empire had ever constructed. Her references to human colonies in dozens of star systems implied that humanity controlled territory comparable in size to the entire Empire. Most terrifying of all was Elena's mention of humanity's military forces as if they were a minor consideration in human society. She described Earth's Space Navy as one of several military branches and spoke about their exploration missions as routine peacetime activities. The implication that the incredibly advanced ship they were facing was just a standard exploration vessel rather than humanity's most powerful warship was almost impossible for Imperial leaders to accept. As cultural exchange continued, through the improved communication systems, the Zephyrians slowly began to realize that humans were not warlike conquerors bent on galactic domination. However, this realization did nothing to reduce their fears about human technological and military capabilities. If anything, the discovery that such incredible power was wielded by a peaceful species that seemed unaware of its own superiority was even more unsettling than dealing with aggressive conquerors would have been. The human tendency toward pragmatic and methodical approaches to problems, combined with their apparent fearlessness in the face of the unknown, represented a fundamental shift in galactic power dynamics that Imperial leaders were struggling to understand. For 3,000 years, the Empire had maintained control through superior technology and military force, but the arrival of humanity had rendered those advantages meaningless overnight. A single human exploration ship possessed more advanced technology than the Empire's entire fleet. Engineer Lisa Carter began collaborating with Zephyrian scientists on theoretical physics problems and inadvertently revealed that human understanding of fundamental forces was centuries ahead of Imperial science. The equations she shared casually as basic engineering principles represented revolutionary breakthroughs that Imperial scientists had been trying to achieve for generations. Lisa's assumption that such advanced mathematics were common knowledge among spacefaring species highlighted the enormous gap between human and Zephyrian scientific achievement. Captain Morrison accepted Emperor Zelnoth's formal invitation to visit the Imperial capital as an honored guest and representative of humanity. The invitation was extended with all the diplomatic courtesy appropriate for the leader of a superior civilization, and Morrison was pleased that first contact had resulted in such a positive outcome. He looked forward to establishing formal diplomatic relations and learning more about galactic civilization from species that had been exploring space for thousands of years. The story concluded with the establishment of formal diplomatic relations between humanity and the Zephyrian Empire, but the Empire would never again feel secure in their position as the galaxy's dominant power. Humanity had emerged as a major galactic civilization not through conquest or intimidation, but through sheer technological competence and unintentional demonstration of capabilities that exceeded anything the galaxy had ever seen. The humans remained largely unaware of the panic they had caused and viewed the first contact mission as a successful diplomatic achievement rather than a display of overwhelming superiority.